Now, Clark.
And Clark was human, huh? Which makes you a murderer, don't it?
Palmer now.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
This is Trigger Warning. I am reporting to you today from my emotional support bunker. To you it may appear that I am simply under a bed, but I assure you that it keeps me in arm's reach from the government. Also, someone is vacuuming, and that thing freaks me the fuck out. Let me take you back through the mists of time, before the Corona time, to a nameless age after the fall of Atlantis, but before the Trump presidency. Veiled by the steaming primordial forests, ruled by the iron fist of Obama the Black. This is the legend of Occupy Wall Street. A horde of protesters beset upon the financial districts of every major city in every first world country, starting at Wall Street, calling themselves Occupy Wall Street, and the others calling themselves Occupy London in London, Occupy Seoul in Seoul, and so forth in all the other cities. The mainstream media assured the public that these protests were not happening and not important. But soon they were overwhelmed. When they eventually did report on the protesters, they depicted them as very small gaggles of homeless weirdos with no clear message.
Seriously? The Occupy Wall Street protest entered its third week today. What started as less than a dozen college students camping out in a park near the New York Stock Exchange is now hundreds of protesters, and it's spread to other cities. But what are they protesting? Nobody seems to know.
Oh, those goofy protesters and their antics. Just what did those protesters want? The mainstream media couldn't figure it out. But foreign journalists could understand it just fine.
The goal was simple: shut down New York Stock Exchange. Targeted as the historical centre of American capitalism, protesters say it symbolises corporate greed and a system which only serves the wealthiest 1%.
The protesters were standing up against the entire political financial system ruled by all-powerful dark overlords, the global elite. And it is those very same elite that own the media companies. The journalists were told by their shadow masters to activate their dark powers and enter full propaganda mode.
More on this, we turn to Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson Jr. Peter, you just posed a great question. Occupy Wall Street. What does Occupy mean?
Well, occupy means conquer, colonize, seize, capture, expropriate.
They lied about the protest in a way that was very deliberate and obvious to the public.
The story also for tomorrow morning's paper is that there just were not that many people out here. Most people expressed themselves and then went back about their business.
But later that night, the New York Police Department put the crowd at 32,000.
It was the sum of all media conspiracy theories come to life. The news pundits were all trying to socially program the public. It was outrageous then, but now it's the standard business model. Try to find out how many protesters there were on Wall Street. It's not there. Wikipedia knows that 2.8% were Asian, 81.2% were white, but as of this broadcast, not the number of protesters. The only official numbers I found outside of Wikipedia was an old report about 400 being arrested for public defecation. You might ask me, Confederate cat, why would there be protests all around the world for a bailout that took place in Wall Street? Isn't Wall Street just one little hair on the chin of America? My poor blind friend, you do not understand. Wall Street handles all the world's money, and they went and got the head stuck in the jar after trying to lick up the peanut butter at the bottom. The dastardly global elite crashed the world's economy and blamed the poor. For generations, the middle class and the working poor had most of their assets tied up in real estate, and now that was suddenly worthless and spirited away from them for bank reasons.
And I was told refinancing would always be possible.
Your house isn't worth what you still owe.
Then, the public was forced to bail out the global elite. And this bailout wasn't just in America, my friend. Every country had their own version of the bailout. Planet Earth's economy has sucked balls ever since. The other planets are laughing at us. The idea of a $1 trillion bailout for the rich is business as usual these days. But back then, it was the first time it ever happened, and the people were pissed. The viscosity of corruption here is so blatant and cartoonish that it's difficult to understand. Imagine a manager who runs his business poorly and can no longer afford to pay himself a regular bonus, so he fires half his staff and gives himself a raise to make up the difference, thinking that now everything is fine, using logic like, but if something helps me, then it's good. This is why politicians only care about the health of Wall Street. That's their economy. They can't understand why they should bail out your economy. The global elite are literally unable to have compassion for other people. They say, "Don't worry, public. We elite got all the money we wanted, so you can go back to work now." They didn't understand why these protesters just didn't go back to the homes they no longer had. But if you have nowhere to go, then why are you asking for a free ride? These are the same people who say, "Where's the money gonna come from?" when asked about funding civil services. The mainstream media was united against the public in an industrial gaslighting of America.
Is it time for President Obama to denounce the Occupy movement? Over 6,400 arrests and counting. In the last week alone, dozens more occupiers arrested. They fought police, destroyed property. Some even allegedly plotted to blow up an Ohio bridge. And 3 occupiers were arrested in Chicago over the weekend on terror charges.
They changed the language used to describe economic ideas all across the media, and they weren't even subtle about it. This included calling any form of assistance to the poor class warfare. Anyone who complained about being poor was now anti-capitalist for choosing to be poor, and therefore anti-American. They lumped protesters with terrorists because they both hate America. They experimented with the terms makers and takers, implying that the rich are the makers and the working poor are the takers, even though the opposite is true. For a short time, they even accused the protesters of being anti-Semitic because so many of the rich in New York are Jewish. They started calling public spending entitlement spending, as in, the protesters are panhandling for more entitlements. The Occupy Wall Street protest was criticized for being overwhelmingly white and poorly representing the needs of immigrant Americans. But worst of all were those crackpots who dared believe in conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theorists were accused of propagating hatred and fear, and they used these same terms and talking points over and over. "They're just yelling and stomping and being homeless for no reason," the media said. "Why don't they just go get jobs?" the media decried. Some citizens bought into this propaganda newspeak and had their own protest called the Tea Party. It was as dumb as it sounds.
He was born Muslim, he was raised Muslim.
He was born in Kenya.
I've never seen any evidence of his Christianity.
I think there's a great possibility that he's a Muslim.
If you have a Muslim father, then the offspring are Muslims.
It was also a pacifist protest against the bailouts, but it was endorsed by the mainstream political right, who insisted that the best way to solve all problems on earth was by supporting the Republican agenda and voting Republican. The Tea Party was mostly made up of bewildered boomers and adult diaper babies with emotional diarrhea. Glenn Beck, a popular Fox News propaganda ass puppet, was directly involved in organizing and cultivating the culture of the Tea Party movement.
In the shadow of monuments, the crowd took in a program that came to resemble a religious revival, with Beck in the pulpit.
Something that is beyond man is happening. America today begins to turn back to God.
Organizers say this is not a political rally. People coming were told not to bring signs because that would take away from the message restoring honor, promoting peace and patriotism.
Time to put on your thinking caps, because I'm going to break down the details for you. Money is a token of exchange that represents work or goods owed. Money was invented because it's much easier to carry around currency of exchange than it is to carry around 30 sacks of wheat, but people started to confuse money for real wealth. A thing is only wealth when it is useful to you. People make bad decisions by misunderstanding this. They think that when they purchase something and they're giving up money in exchange, that they're losing wealth. Not so. If the trade is agreed upon by both parties, it is of benefit to both parties, or else it would not have been agreed upon by both. So each side of a fair trade becomes wealthier. That's the beauty of free exchange, making people wealthier at every opportunity. You might imagine wanting to start a business, so you take the idea to some friends who each invest some money in it and get it started, selling them shares or potential ownership in the business. This way you can found a new business faster and more reliably than you could on your own. This is a nice way to depict it, isn't it? That's how we were taught to think of it. But the difference between this and loan sharking is the word friend. But that's just a word, and friendships dissolve when money's involved. That's why you're better off to get a loan from a regulated bank instead. Companies sell shares to get an influx of money that they can use to quickly expand their business, and, if successful, offer a profitable return to both themselves and their investors. And for normal businesses that actually provide a service to society, this is theoretically a good thing. Except, couldn't a business just present its case to a loan officer at a bank and get a loan? Yes. But selling shares lets you get money faster, with no oversight and no background check. Selling shares is the only way for a little online company like Facebook to become a faceless mega-corporation hand puppet for the Illuminati. It allows businesses to make money and succeed, not because they're good at serving the public, but because of their business connections with the elite and by looking good on the stock market. There are a lot of businesses that, thanks to Wall Street, are able to make money just by selling shares of themselves without actually doing any kind of real work or performing a real service. There are businesses that exist as nothing more than corporate shilling potentials, essentially printing their own money backed up by the labor of the American workforce. Now I will reveal to you the arcane secret to cheat at everything by abusing statistics.
Logic should do you.
Imagine, if you will, that you're at a roulette table and you have $10,000 to gamble with. Ignore all the glittery little numbers and just look at the red and the black. Roughly a 50-50 chance to win or lose. Put down a small bet of a mere $100 on your favorite color. Either you will win or you will lose. If you win, collect your winnings. Then put down $100 again and repeat. If you lose, you add $100 to the previous bet. This covers the loss of the previous bet. If you lose again, add another $100 and so on until you win. Then you start back at $100 again. You are nearly guaranteed to make money doing this, and it's extremely rare to have to increase your bet more than 4 or 5 times. You can even bet on both red and black at the same time and make money by running 2 different sets of adjustable bets. Now, a single stock investment is random. The stock's value might go up or it might go down. 50-50. Imagine you're doing the same gambling technique with the stock market, but you're not using your own money, of course. You're using other people's money, and you're not responsible for the losses, but you still take commissions on the wins. And you're not waiting for the ball to stop spinning, making one bet at a time. You're using a supercomputer to make thousands of bets a second. And if your supercomputer is fast enough, you can tell which stocks your competitor is trying to buy them first, and sell them back to him at a higher price. What happens when you cheat like this long enough is eventually the house will bust. Stockbrokers are doing this, playing the odds in a way that is just complicated enough that you can't really tell that they're cheating. And the American public is the house. Not only are they gambling with your money, the game is rigged. The police were all over this protest from months before it started. Yes, you heard me right. The local city police, the FBI, Homeland Security, and others assembled a specialized council called the Domestic Security Alliance Council that was tasked with monitoring, infiltrating, and guiding the course of the protests before it was even a twinkle in a hippie's eye. They called it domestic, even though it was international. As much as I would have liked to see those bankers hung from the parapets and that bull turned into their grave marker, the protesters were pacifists. The police love beating pacifists because they don't fight back. They beat the living snot out of those college students on live television over and over for months. This was back before it was mandatory for police to fire pepper spray wildly into any large gathering of people. When they started using pepper spray on crowds, it was outrageous. This one asshole became a national villain and a meme. It was so bad for him that he was later diagnosed with PTSD and had to get therapy. The newscasters were all in on it together, but even they didn't see the big picture. There's this conspiracy theory that the quote-unquote the Jews control the media. There's a grain of truth to this. There's one man, the Jew who controls the media, George Soros, who controls the lion's share of Western media. He is obnoxiously Jewish and very involved with politics. He's notorious for his use of propaganda and making his media outlets twist the truth in support of his private ideological theories. His social experiments and conspiracies against the public have made him responsible for the modern wave of anti-Jewish racism. One of the few television stations that George Soros doesn't directly control is Fox, and Fox lays into him like a hen laying an egg.
The Occupy movement is now being run out of Washington, D.C., and offices belonging to the Institute for Policy Studies, a far-left outfit. The director of the group is John Kavanaugh, longtime liberal activist. His nonprofit institute accepts money from, surprise, George Soros. From their D.C. offices, the Occupy leadership emails game plans to their hardcore members, telling them where to assemble, what to protest, and even what to wear. Today, for example, the Occupy agitators were told to wear red for a New York City protest. Again, the goal of the occupiers is no longer to raise awareness of economic injustice. It is to disturb the peace and attack those with whom they disagree. The occupiers have big plans for the political conventions this summer, and disruption is the strategy.
The super elite aren't completely unified against the public. They're constantly competing with each other and trying to outbid each other for control of the planet's governments. Fox is controlled by American elite Richard Murdoch, who is nearly as big of a poop face as Soros. There are no heroes and villains here, just old rich kids having a pissing contest, and you're being pissed on. So now it's time to ask the villain to explain their plot to us. Why? Why would the evil elite who think they control our lives cultivate a massive protest and also try to cover it up at the same time?
Good morning, my golden retrievers. What kind of havoc shall the Carver Media Group create in the world today? News.
Floods in Pakistan, riots in Paris, and a plane crash in California.
Excellent. Mr. Jones, are we ready to release our new software?
Yes, sir. As requested, it's full of bugs, which means people will be forced to upgrade for years.
Outstanding. Mr. Wallace, call the president. Tell him if he doesn't sign the bill lowering the cable rates, we'll release the video of him with a cheerleader in the Chicago motel room.
Inspired, sir.
And after he signs the bill, release the tape anyway.
Consider him sly.
In the increasingly lifelike book 1984, the global totalitarian government, run by an assembly simply called the Party, knows that their tyranny is going to seem oppressive, so they present a powerful rogue party member to the public, a Mr. O'Brien. The party has secretly put O'Brien in this opposition position so that when members of the public want to protest the system, they go to him so he can have them arrested. It's the same reason why when Hitler was making mass arrests of the Jews and the gays and the minorities, he left the synagogues and gay bars open so they would have a place to gather, so it was easier to round them up. The global elites knew there was inevitably going to be a public response to the Wall Street bailout, so they arranged it themselves so they could keep tabs on it. To change society, you need to organize political activists, start new political parties, or lobby groups, or run new candidates, and design new political and economic solutions to old problems. Protests, rallies, riots, and marches do not change society, so that's what the elite created to stop real change from taking place. They gathered the activists together in one place to corral them, abuse them, and arrest the few that were capable of changing the world. The elites carefully divided the American people against each other and made sure that both sides fit into the nicely compliant Democratic and Republican camps. They tricked folks into blaming the Democrats or Republicans so they would identify and support the opposite party. They channeled the people's outrage, suspicion, and loyalty in such a way as to prevent the elites themselves from looking bad. And the equivalent of this was being done in every nation on a global scale except Iceland. The elites always forget about Iceland. The people knew they were being lied to by the media, but it was hard to see the big picture. The people noticed this was happening right in time for the next election. People noticed that the protesters had unions and a catered lunch every day. The people could protest, but only by joining one of two camps. Even by protesting against the system, they were still being taken advantage of by the system. The global and American elites don't really care which country wins a war or which company comes up on top. They don't care if the ball lands on red or black because they're playing both sides at once. Either way, they win and you lose. For the elite, the deeper a nation goes into debt, the better, because who do you think we owe that money to? That's right, we bailed out the elite by putting ourselves into debt, and now we have to pay off this debt to the elite. They're getting paid both ways. Every war, every recession, every riot, every act of terrorism has to be paid for, and it puts us deeper into their debt. The price that the government tagged the bailout at was $700 billion, often rounded up to $1 trillion. That's nothing to scoff at, but that's just the icing on the cake.
No matter, it's not on the elemental chart. It's not fucking real. Right? All right? Stay with me. We don't create shit. We don't build anything.
Through coded language, they also committed $7.2 trillion to the Federal Reserve and another $7.2 trillion to the Treasury Department, and they, quote-unquote, guaranteed to keep Wall Street perpetually bailed out.
I don't get it. Why are they confessing? They're not confessing.
They're bragging.
Don't presume for a moment that you're not still paying for this. Oh, time to go.